Ancient cliffside cities have outlasted modern buildings by centuries. This video uncovers the forgotten engineering principles that gave these stone giants their incredible stability. You will learn how civilizations carved into impossible rock faces created structures that endure with almost no maintenance, revealing secrets our own engineers are now racing to understand. How did they build homes that dance with earthquakes instead of collapsing? What hidden water management systems kept their walls from crumbling for over 1,000 years? The answers challenge everything we assume about ancient technology and modern progress. Are we truly building for the future, or have we lost the wisdom of permanence? This concept of stability as a symbiotic relationship is a radical departure from how we often build today. We tend to see the Earth as a platform, a foundation to be flattened and forced into submission before we lay the first brick. For the architects of cliffside cities, the mountain was not an obstacle but a partner. Their entire approach was rooted in deep geological intelligence, a profound understanding of the land's bones. Before a single stone was carved, they spent generations observing. They learned to read the rock faces like maps, identifying the strongest, most stable strata of stone, the natural fracture lines to avoid, and the way water naturally flowed and drained across the precipice. This was not a rushed construction project. It was a slow, deliberate courtship with the earth. Geologist Dr. Anya Sharma emphasizes that these builders selected sites with an almost intuitive sense of geotechnical engineering, choosing locations where the bedrock was a single, massive unit, inherently resistant to shattering. They were not just building on the landscape, they were building from it, weaving their structures into the very fabric of the mountain. This harmony between the built and the natural environment created a unified mass that could resist forces which would tear a conventional building apart. So how did this foundational wisdom translate into physical form? The secret lies in a principle modern engineering is only now fully appreciating: the power of continuous load. That initial decision to build vertically seems almost illogical from our modern perspective, yet it was the foundation of their entire strategy for survival. These were not just houses perched for a view, they were deeply integrated systems designed to leverage every single advantage the cliff offered. Natural fortification was the most obvious benefit, creating a near impenetrable defense against any threat rising from the valley floor. But the advantages ran far deeper than simple security. The towering rock face acted as a colossal thermal battery, absorbing the sun's heat during the day and slowly releasing it through the cool nights, while also providing shade during the hottest summer months. This created a passive climate control system of remarkable efficiency, leading to naturally cool summers and surprisingly warm winters inside the stone dwellings. Ancient texts from various cultures describe site selection not merely as a practical survey, but as a sacred process. It was a search for a living, breathing part of the earth, one that aligned with celestial movements and possessed the right energetic qualities. They sought a geological intuition, a way of reading the land that we are only just beginning to comprehend with our modern scientific tools. This deliberate, almost reverent placement was the first and most critical step in achieving long-term stability. It transformed a seemingly hostile, vertical environment from a perceived disadvantage into a multifaceted, life-giving asset. The cliff was never an obstacle to be conquered. It was the most trusted partner in the entire construction process. And with this profound partnership established, the real engineering marvels could begin, starting with how they carved and shaped the living rock itself. This geological intuition was not a vague feeling, but a precise and practical science honed through lifetimes of observation. these master builders could walk along a vast cliff face and identify the specific bands of stone that would stand firm for centuries. They consistently chose resilient rock types like sandstone and limestone, not for their beauty, but for their incredible load-bearing capacity and resistance to weathering. Their eyes were trained to spot the subtle signs of weakness, the hairline fractures and unstable slopes that signaled future collapse. They inherently understood the land's history, avoiding ancient fault lines and areas where water had undercut the stone, even without the geological maps we rely on today. Their selection process was a form of deep listening, a way of hearing the story the rock itself was telling about its strength and its vulnerabilities. They sought out the sweet spots, those perfect zones where the cliff was a single, unyielding monolith. This foundational choice, this marriage of human intention to the most stable part of the mountain, created a partnership that could not be broken. It is a principle that our modern engineering surveys, with their core samples and ground-penetrating radar, now confirm with scientific certainty. The unshakable base they established was the first and most critical investment in permanence. But choosing the perfect rock was only half the battle. The real genius was in how they then transformed it from a solid wall into a living, breathing city. Yet the mountain, chosen for its unyielding strength, faced a constant and silent adversary, water. This life-giving resource was also the primary sculptor of the landscape and the greatest threat to any structure carved from it. Left unchecked, water seeps into microscopic cracks, freezes, expands, and over centuries pries even the strongest stone apart. The inhabitants of these cliff cities understood this paradox intimately, and their response was not to fight water, but to guide it with an almost preternatural foresight. They engineered a fluid defense system that managed every drop of rain from the moment it touched the highest peak until it was safely stored or channeled away. Their entire approach was a masterclass in proactive hydrology, turning a destructive force into a controlled asset. They carved channels with precise, gentle slopes directly into the cliff face, invisible from a distance but functioning as perfect arteries for rainfall. These weren't just gutters, they were calculated pathways designed to use gravity's pull to direct water away from critical load-bearing walls and foundational stone. At strategic points, the channels would feed into deep, bell-shaped cisterns carved into the interior of the mountain, capturing the precious resource for times of drought. The most brilliant innovation was often found in the details, like the carefully angled drainage spouts that projected water far away from the base of the structure, preventing splashback and the slow, steady erosion that undermines so many modern foundations. In the city of Petra, Nabatean engineers faced an even greater challenge: seasonal flash floods that could roar through narrow canyons with devastating force. Their solution was a complex, city-wide network of dams and diversion tunnels that tamed these torrents, redirecting the destructive energy safely around their treasured facades. This hydrological wisdom created a perfect shield, effectively eliminating the saturation and relentless freeze-thaw cycles that crumble our contemporary concrete within decades. By managing water so completely, they protected their architectural work from the inside out, ensuring the stone remained dry, stable, and intact. It was a fluid defense that has held strong for 1,000 years. But managing the elements was only one part of the equation. The true test of their engineering came when the very ground began to shake. This seamless fusion with the stone represents the pinnacle of their architectural philosophy, the art of rock-cut integration. These builders did not erect walls upon the cliff, they coaxed the cliff itself into becoming the walls. Every room, every stairway, every temple was painstakingly carved from the living rock, creating a single, continuous mass with the mountain. This approach eliminated the weakest links found in all assembled structures, the joints and connections where different materials meet. In a conventional building, stress concentrates at these points, prying them apart under pressure. But in a monolithic cliff city, any force, whether from gravity or a tremor, is spread evenly across the entire rock face. There are no individual components to fail, only a single, unified entity that moves and settles as one. This process demanded an almost unimaginable level of foresight and precision. There were no second chances, no way to patch a mistake. A misjudged strike of the chisel was permanent, carving a flaw directly into the building's core. This required not just skill, but a deep spatial intelligence, an ability to see the finished city within the raw stone long before it was revealed. The result was a structure that was fundamentally, geologically part of the mountain. This profound integration is the key to its legendary seismic resistance. When an earthquake strikes, a modern city is a collection of separate objects, each shaking at its own frequency, colliding and crumbling. But a rock-cut city does not fight the tremor, it sways with it. The entire cliff and the city within it move in harmony with the Earth's vibrations, a unified giant riding the waves rather than being shattered by them. The line between the natural world and human creation becomes so blurred it practically disappears. This is not architecture placed upon the landscape. It is architecture become the landscape, and that is the ultimate secret to a resilience that our modern methods still struggle to match. This intuitive grasp of physics reveals itself in the very bones of their architecture. While they carved from solid stone, they still had to create vast, open spaces, chambers that felt grand and airy rather than claustrophobic. The challenge was monumental: how to support the immense weight of the mountain above without filling the room below with a forest of supporting columns. Their solution was a masterclass in invisible engineering, a sophisticated system of load distribution that channeled gravity's relentless pull along carefully calculated paths. They understood that weight, like water, seeks the path of least resistance, and they built conduits to guide it safely away. Inside their grandest halls, you will find arches and vaults seamlessly carved into the ceiling, shapes that naturally redirect pressure outwards and downwards towards the walls. They strategically left pillars of living rock in place at critical points, not as afterthoughts but as integral, planned supports that were part of the original design. Walls were not uniform, they were subtly tapered, thicker at the base where the stress was greatest, thinning as they rose. This was not guesswork, it was an empirical science perfected over generations, a passed-down knowledge of how force flows through stone. They were mapping stress trajectories centuries before the term existed, ensuring that every ounce of weight from the city above was funneled directly into the most stable, deepest parts of the bedrock. The true genius of this approach is what you do not see: the absence of weak points. There are no joints between a column and a ceiling that can crack under strain, no separate blocks that can shift and settle. The entire structure, from the highest carved ornament to the deepest foundation, is a single, continuous mass, cleverly sculpted to make the mountain itself bear the burden. The immense weight of their city simply vanishes into the cliff, a feat of architectural magic that has stood the test of time. How did they achieve such precision without modern tools? The answer lies not in their instruments, but in their mindset, one that viewed construction as a conversation with the earth itself. High on a sun-drenched Colorado cliff, a city of stone seems to grow directly from the rock wall. This is Cliff Palace at Mesa Verde, a breathtaking example of ancestral Puebloan genius that brings all the abstract principles of stability into sharp, tangible focus. Its 150 rooms are not a fortress imposed upon the landscape, but a community woven into the very fabric of a colossal natural alcove. the builders began with an incredible advantage, a massive sandstone overhang that acted as a giant permanent roof. This single geological feature shielded the entire settlement from the direct impact of rain and snow, the very elements that relentlessly erode exposed structures. But they did not stop there. They read the alcove's contours like a master blueprint, placing their largest multi-story constructions in the deepest, most supported recesses where the rock offered the greatest strength. The entire city was anchored directly back into the cliff wall, creating a bond that refused to let go. They even sourced their materials with profound local intelligence, using sandstone blocks held together with a mud mortar. Why does this detail matter so much? Because when the desert sun beat down and the rock expanded, or when the cold night caused it to contract, the buildings and the mountain moved as one. They expanded and contracted at the same rate, eliminating the internal stresses that cause modern materials to crack and fail over time. Cliff Palace is not a monument to conquering nature, but a lasting lesson in listening to it. Every choice, from its sheltered location to its local stone, was an act of profound adaptation. It stands as a masterclass in building with the land, not just on it, proving that true resilience is found in harmony. And this harmony extended to the very air they breathed and the water they drank, managed by systems of breathtaking sophistication. The intricate facade of Petra's treasury appears as if it were grown, not built, from the towering cliff face. This illusion of natural creation stems from a radical construction technique, the top-down method. Unlike building upward, where workers risk damaging completed sections below, the Nabatean stoneworkers began their work at the very top of the rock wall. They carved the highest cornices and urns first, then worked their way systematically downward. This approach served two brilliant purposes. It prevented tons of falling stone debris from smashing the delicate, finished carvings beneath them, and it allowed the sculptors to continuously read the stone's natural grain and fissures as they descended. They could adapt their work in real time, following the rock's own suggestions, avoiding weak points and incorporating its strongest, most beautiful veins into the heart of their design. For their most important monuments, they did not use just any sandstone. They carefully selected a specific, dense stratum of rock, a band of stone renowned for its fine grain and incredible resistance to the wind and sand that would slowly sandblast softer layers. This was a deliberate, long-term investment in the legacy of their art. Perhaps the most clever trick is one you would never notice: the presence of a sacrificial layer. Above the elegant capital of the treasury, the Nabateans intentionally left a thick band of untreated, softer rock. This layer was designed to fail, to absorb the full brunt of rain, wind, and thermal expansion over the centuries. It weathers away sacrificially, protecting the intricate carvings below from direct exposure. This long-term foresight is a hallmark of their engineering mindset. Meanwhile, the interior chambers of these grand tombs were often surprisingly simple and unadorned. This was not a lack of ambition, but a profound structural calculation. By keeping the internal spaces largely solid or using simple, rounded chambers, they massively reduced the risk of ceiling collapse under the mountain's immense weight. The breathtaking exterior was not merely for ceremony. It was a load-bearing masterpiece, its thick walls and columns carefully proportioned to channel the cliff's own weight safely around the hollowed-out spaces within. Petra's enduring rose-red grandeur is not a happy accident. It is the direct result of a philosophy that saw the mountain as a partner, selecting the perfect material and employing a carving technique that worked in concert with the stone's deepest properties. This deep material science allowed them to create a city that feels both impossibly grand and eternally rooted, a testament to the power of listening to the whispers of the stone itself. The soft stone of Cappadocia presented a paradox, a material both easy to carve and dangerously fragile. Entire cities were not built upon this landscape, but excavated from within it, their architects mastering the art of subtraction. In the malleable volcanic tuff, they carved downward, creating labyrinths that reached 10, 12, even 18 levels deep into the earth. This was not a haphazard digging project. It was a masterpiece of underground urban planning, made possible by a profound understanding of compressive strength. They knew that while the rock was soft, it possessed a remarkable ability to bear immense weight if properly managed. The entire city functioned like a single, living structure, with tunnels acting as arteries and vertical ventilation shafts serving as lungs, drawing fresh air to the deepest chambers while maintaining a stable, secure environment. The genius of their approach is visible in the details left behind. Walk through these silent halls today, and you will see how they turned the mountain's own substance into its greatest support. Throughout the excavation process, they strategically left pillars of living rock in place at regular intervals. These were not added later. They were integral parts of the original design, left standing as the surrounding stone was carefully removed to create vast, open spaces. This method ensured the sealing load was continuously channeled down through these solid columns directly into the firm foundation below. Furthermore, they almost exclusively carved rooms with rounded corners and arched ceilings. Why this specific shape? An arch is nature's perfect load-bearing form, a geometry that naturally redirects the downward force of gravity outwards and downwards along the curve of the wall, preventing stress from concentrating on a single weak point. A flat ceiling would have been far more likely to crack and fail under the constant pressure, but these graceful arches have held firm for centuries. This architectural wisdom transformed the soft stone from a liability into an asset. The very porosity of the volcanic rock that made it easy to dig also gave it incredible insulating properties. Deep underground, the temperature remained constant and comfortable through both scorching summers and freezing winters. This thermal stability was not just a comfort for the inhabitants, it was a critical form of structural preservation. The rock was not subjected to the daily expansion and contraction, the relentless thermal stress that slowly fractures and weakens buildings on the surface. Cappadocia stands as a powerful testament to adaptive genius, proving that the core principles of stability are not rigid rules but a flexible language. Whether in the hard sandstone of Petra or the soft tuff of Turkey, ancient builders demonstrated a universal truth. They listened to the land, understood its unique voice, and engineered a response that turned its inherent characteristics into the very source of their longevity. This generational wisdom was a living blueprint, etched not on parchment but in memory and practice. The master builder did not learn from a textbook, he learned at the elbow of his elder, listening to stories that encoded critical data about the land. A legend about a river spirit's anger might actually contain vital information about a valley's 1,000-year flood cycle. A song describing the journey of the sun across a particular cliff face could mark the most stable, sun-warmed rock strata ideal for carving. This was a sophisticated system of knowledge transfer, where practical engineering solutions were woven into the very fabric of culture and spirituality. The techniques for selecting stone, for carving drainage channels, for aligning a structure with the bedrock were not just construction methods, they were sacred responsibilities. This ensured the knowledge was treated with reverence and passed down with meticulous care, not merely as a trade skill, but as a legacy for the entire community's survival. It created a powerful feedback loop spanning centuries. If a building technique failed after 50 years, that failure was remembered, its story told and retold until it became a cautionary tale that guided the next generation's work. Successes were celebrated and their methods refined. Imagine a library where every book was written by the landscape itself, and the librarians were the elders who had spent a lifetime learning to read it. This is the system that produced such profound structural resilience. The enduring stone of these cities is a testament to the strength of this intangible heritage, a living library of practical wisdom that was, without question, their most sophisticated and valuable tool. But what happens when this chain of knowledge is broken? The silent stone still holds its secrets, waiting for us to learn its language once more. Their material science was a quiet revolution, hidden in the humblest of ingredients. While we might marvel at the strength of modern concrete, these builders achieved something arguably more advanced, a flexible, living bond with the land itself. Their mortar was not a single, standardized recipe, but a locally sourced alchemy. They mixed mud, clay, and ash, sometimes enriching it with plant resins or other organic compounds. This created a binding agent that was not brittle but could breathe. It possessed a slight give, a flexibility that allowed it to sway with the cliff's natural shifts and thermal movements without shattering. This forgiving quality meant that small stresses were absorbed and dissipated, rather than concentrating into destructive cracks. The true genius, however, lay in their holistic approach to sourcing. Every stone they used was quarried from the immediate vicinity. This was not just a matter of convenience, it was a profound engineering principle, because the building blocks and the mountain itself came from the same geological layer. They shared an identical response to the environment. On a hot day, both the cliff and the structure would expand at precisely the same rate. During a cold night, they would contract in perfect unison. This eliminated differential movement, the silent destroyer of so many modern constructions where different materials pull against each other, creating fractures over time. Their buildings did not fight the mountain, they moved with it as a single, responsive skin. This intelligence extended even to their use of what we might call imperfect materials. In some walls, you find softer, more porous stones carefully placed as infill between the larger, load-bearing blocks. This was a deliberate design choice. These softer stones could compress and settle slightly over decades, accommodating minor shifts in the foundation without transferring destructive stress to the primary structure. It acted as a sacrificial layer within the wall itself, a buffer that ensured the overall integrity remained intact. The result was a composite material, a collaboration between stone and mortar that was not only incredibly durable but also inherently repairable. If a section was damaged, the same local materials were readily available to make a perfect, compatible patch. This stands in stark contrast to many of our modern systems, where a failure often requires a complete, costly replacement. Their entire philosophy was one of resourceful partnership. They did not seek to conquer the landscape with imported, high-tech solutions, but to listen to it and use its own language to build. This deep material wisdom created structures that did not merely sit on the land, but truly healed with it, their very substance in a continuous, gentle dialogue with the earth that has lasted for millennia. The ground does not always stand still, and these master builders knew it. In regions where the earth itself trembles, their cities were not designed as fortresses to defy the shaking, but as partners to move with it. The very quality that makes their survival so astonishing, their monolithic construction, is the core of their seismic secret. A conventional building is an assembly of parts, a collection of bricks, beams, and joints. When an earthquake hits, these individual components shake at different frequencies, pulling against each other until the weakest connection fails. But a city carved from a single cliff has no weak connections. There are no joints to snap, no separate blocks to be shaken loose. The entire settlement, from the highest chamber to the deepest foundation, is one continuous mass of stone. When the tremor arrives, the entire city and the mountain it is part of simply sway together, a geological giant riding the waves of energy rather than being broken by them. This is not a rigid defiance but a flexible dance. They even engineered this flexibility into their masonry. The mortar binding their stones was not a brittle cement, but a forgiving mix of local materials with a slight give. This allowed walls to absorb and dissipate the energy of a tremor through countless tiny, harmless movements within the mortar itself, rather than concentrating that energy into a single, catastrophic crack. Think of it like a tree bending in a strong wind, its roots and trunk flexing to survive a force that would shatter something rigid. They further refined this approach by avoiding long, unbroken walls. Instead, they built their cities as collections of smaller, discrete units, separated by natural rock or narrow passages. During a seismic event, these individual blocks could shift and settle independently, a phenomenon that prevented the buildup of destructive resonant frequencies across a large, rigid structure. This ancient principle of segmenting a building to control damage is a cornerstone of modern earthquake engineering. Their profound insight was to design for movement, not against it. They understood that you cannot stop the earth from shaking, so the only path to survival is to learn its rhythm. This passive seismic design, born from generations of observing the land's behavior, created a resilience that feels almost miraculous. It is a testament to a philosophy that saw stability not as a state of rigid stillness, but as a dynamic, graceful equilibrium with the forces of the planet. The very stone that sheltered them also breathed with the rhythms of the day. This thermal dance was not just a matter of comfort, it was a critical form of structural preservation. The colossal mass of the cliff face functioned as a giant geological battery. Throughout the sun-baked hours, the rock would slowly absorb warmth, preventing the interiors from becoming ovens. Then, as the cool night descended, that stored heat would gently radiate back into the living spaces. This daily cycle created a remarkably stable internal climate, but its most profound effect was on the buildings themselves. Modern materials, from concrete to steel, are constantly expanding and contracting with temperature swings. Each cycle is a tiny act of fatigue, a subtle stress that, over decades, leads to cracks, spalling, and eventual failure. The ancient builders, by aligning their homes with the mountain's immense thermal mass, effectively eliminated this relentless wear and tear. Their structures experienced almost no differential movement because the city and the cliff were always heating and cooling as one single entity. This wisdom extended to the very placement of each room. Builders would carefully orient openings and chambers to capture the low, warming rays of the winter sun, while using deep-set alcoves and strategic rock overhangs to create cooling shade during the intense summer heat. This was not just architectural cleverness, it was a masterclass in passive energy design that required zero ongoing energy input and produced zero destructive byproducts. The comfort of the inhabitants walking through those stable, temperate rooms was a direct indicator of the structural health of the city itself. A comfortable room was a stable room, a space where the materials were not being secretly stressed and degraded by the environment. This seamless link between human well-being and architectural longevity is a forgotten art, a holistic principle where the goal of a pleasant life and the goal of a permanent structure were one and the same. They understood that to build for people was to build for the mountain, and in doing so, they created a legacy of comfort etched in stone. Their greatest strength was a vision that stretched across centuries. The architects of these stone cities were not building for themselves, not for a quick profit or a short-term need. They were planting a forest whose shade they knew they would never sit under. This generational mindset, this psychology of permanence, permeated every single choice. It justified the decades spent simply observing a cliff face before the first chisel ever struck stone. It validated the back-breaking labor of carving a drainage channel that would not see its first true test until a great-grandchild was born. Where we might see over-engineering, they saw essential insurance. A wall was made twice as thick as strictly necessary, not for the storms of the next year, but for the storms of the next millennium. This was not merely a practical decision, it was a spiritual one. In many of these cultures, to create something that would endure was a sacred act, a way of honoring their ancestors and fulfilling their duty to those yet to come. The stability of the stone was a physical manifestation of their commitment to the future itself. This stands in quiet contrast to so much of our modern world, where the relentless pressures of speed and cost efficiency often shorten our horizons. We build for decades, they built for forever. The incredible endurance of their work is a testament to the power of patience, proving that the most resilient material of all may not be stone, but a far-sighted vision. Every curve in the stone was a conversation with gravity itself. These builders understood that the downward pull was a constant, unyielding force, and their designs engaged in a quiet, brilliant negotiation with it. Look closely at the towering walls of these cities, and you might notice they are not perfectly vertical. Many are built with a subtle inward tilt, a technique known as battering. This slight angle, almost imperceptible to the eye, redirects the immense weight of the wall downward and inward towards the solid core of the mountain. Instead of pushing outward and risking collapse, the structure becomes more stable as it settles, locking itself more firmly into place with the passage of time. This same profound understanding of load and force is visible in their ceilings. Where they created openings for doors or interior passages, they rarely used a true arch. Instead, they mastered the corbelled arch, a technique where each successive layer of stone is laid slightly inward over the one below. The result is a majestic, stepped ceiling that resembles an inverted staircase. This method allowed them to span wide spaces by gradually shifting the weight from the center of the opening outwards to the supporting walls, distributing the burden along a graceful, cascading path that the mountain was perfectly equipped to bear. The same meticulous foresight was applied to the ceaseless work of wind and water. Erosion was not a vague threat, but a slow, precise sculptor they learned to outmaneuver. Above nearly every doorway and window, you will find a carefully carved protective lip or a slender overhang. These were not merely decorative flourishes, they were functional rain gutters etched in stone. When a storm swept across the cliff face, these projections acted as tiny shields, catching rainfall and casting it away in a clean arc, preventing water from streaming down the vulnerable vertical surfaces of the door frames and seeping into the microscopic cracks that could eventually widen and fracture. The pathways and staircases tell a similar story of hydrological genius. Instead of being perfectly flat or sloping outward, they were often carved with a gentle, almost imperceptible incline back towards the heart of the mountain. This subtle grading acted as a guide, channeling every drop of runoff away from the perilous edge and towards hidden internal collection channels or cisterns. Water was never allowed to fall where it wished. It was given a designated path, a purposeful journey from the moment it touched the city. None of these features were accidental. They were the direct result of generations of observation, a long-term study of what stood firm and what eventually succumbed to the elements. A cracked lintel taught the next builder to carve a deeper overhang. A settling wall informed the need for a more pronounced batter. This was a slow, cumulative science where each refinement was a hard-won lesson in endurance. Every curve, every angle, every slight tilt was a deliberate and critical adaptation in the timeless battle against natural forces. These subtle refinements were the final, masterful touches on a masterpiece of endurance, proving that true resilience is often found not in grand gestures, but in 1,000 small, intelligent whispers carved in stone. Perhaps the most profound secret to their longevity was not their construction, but their desertion. We often assume that a living, maintained city is a preserved one, but for these cliffside wonders, the opposite proved true. Their abandonment became an unexpected form of protection. When the final inhabitants departed, a profound silence fell, and with it, the constant churn of human activity ceased. No more cooking fires filled rooms with soot and heat that could weaken stone over centuries. No more modifications were made, where well-intentioned but less knowledgeable generations might patch a wall with an incompatible material, inadvertently creating a point of failure. The structures were left to simply be, allowing the original, brilliant engineering to function exactly as its creators had envisioned, settling slowly into a perfect, unbothered equilibrium with the natural world. In some remarkable cases, the very crisis that drove people away actively safeguarded the empty city. A prolonged drought or a shift in climate patterns, while creating hardship for the community, often meant that the primary agents of decay were removed. A falling water table, for instance, could protect foundations from the relentless creeping damp that undermines so many structures. Without people to constantly draw water or alter the landscape, the hydrological systems the builders so carefully designed were left to manage only natural rainfall, a task they were masterfully engineered to handle for centuries. This created a perfect historical snapshot. The silence that followed human departure allowed these places to become perfect time capsules. Their stability was not maintained, but frozen, sealed in a moment of perfection that we can now study undisturbed. It is a haunting paradox that the end of a community's story is what guaranteed the survival of its home, leaving behind a legacy etched in silent, enduring stone for us to rediscover. The silent stone is finally beginning to speak our language. With the hum of a drone and the invisible pulse of radar, modern technology is translating the ancient wisdom carved into these cliffs, revealing a sophistication that defies our assumptions. Three-dimensional laser scanning maps every contour of a city with millimeter precision, creating a digital twin that can be analyzed from every possible angle. This allows researchers to see what the naked eye cannot, like the subtle, almost imperceptible gradients of a drainage channel or the way stress patterns flow through a rock-hewn wall exactly as the builders intended. Ground-penetrating radar peers deep into the mountain itself, uncovering hidden cisterns and sealed chambers that show just how comprehensive their water management systems truly were. These are not just rough-hewn tunnels, they are precisely calculated networks. The scans confirm that load was distributed with a near-optimal efficiency, as if these ancient engineers had an intuitive grasp of finite element analysis centuries before the computer was invented. Perhaps the most startling revelation comes from the laboratory, where scientists analyze samples of the ancient mortar. Our modern Portland cement is designed for rapid strength, but it can become brittle and degrade over decades. The ancient mix, however, tells a different story. Its chemical composition, often including local organic materials, allows for a slow, long-term reaction. Crystals form and interlock over centuries, creating a bond that actually grows stronger with age. This is a self-healing, living material, a stark contrast to the static nature of our own industrial compounds. This modern validation does not diminish the past, it illuminates it. We are not proving that they were lucky, we are proving that they were brilliant in a way we are only now learning to measure. The gap between their deep, observational intuition and our data-driven science is rapidly closing, revealing a shared, timeless pursuit. We are discovering that the true blueprint for permanence was not lost. It was simply waiting in the stone, ready for us to develop the tools to read it. Their stone-carved wisdom is no longer a relic of the past, but a vital blueprint for our future. The same principles that gave cliff cities their thousand-year stability are now being rediscovered by architects and engineers seeking to build a more sustainable world. This is not about copying ancient styles, but about embracing a core philosophy, one of profound integration with a place. The modern green building movement champions site-specific design, passive thermal regulation, and locally sourced materials with low embodied energy, concepts these ancient builders mastered out of necessity. They did not have the option to import steel beams or manufacture high-performance glass, so they turned to the landscape itself as both their quarry and their climate control system. Today, this approach is evolving into a field known as biomimicry, where engineers deliberately emulate natural forms and systems. We see buildings designed with ventilation shafts that function like termite mounds, maintaining a constant internal temperature without any energy input. We see bridges and roofs shaped like leaves or spiderwebs, using elegant curves to achieve immense strength with minimal material. This is a direct echo of the ancients' use of arches and rounded chambers to distribute weight flawlessly through stone. The goal is the same: to create structures that work with natural forces, not against them. This ancient perspective presents a profound challenge to our modern culture of disposability. We are surrounded by buildings designed with a finite lifespan, where components are not meant to be repaired but replaced, a cycle that generates immense waste. The cliffside cities stand in silent judgment of this practice. Their entire ethos was built on durability and the simple, profound ability to be fixed. A cracked wall could be patched with the same local mud and stone, a perfect match that preserved the structural harmony. This repairability was baked into their very methodology, a stark contrast to the planned obsolescence that plagues so much contemporary construction. There is a growing recognition that true resilience is not born from technological complexity alone, but often from simplicity, adaptability, and a deep, intuitive understanding of the local environment. It is about listening to the wind, the sun, and the rain of a specific place just as they did. These abandoned cities are no longer just historical curiosities for tourists. They are becoming active guidebooks, their silent stones offering urgent, practical lessons on how to build a world that can endure. The stone walls themselves were a form of cultural memory. Building a city into a cliff was never just an engineering project. It was a collective act of faith and identity that wove the community together. The long, arduous process of carving a new chamber was often a ritual in itself, accompanied by ceremonies that honored the mountain and the ancestors. This transformed back-breaking labor into a shared, meaningful endeavor, ensuring that every adult in the community understood the principles of their construction not as abstract rules, but as lived experience. Knowledge was not locked away in a guild of master builders. It was sung in the songs that set the rhythm for work, and told in the stories that explained why a wall must be angled just so to withstand the wind spirits. This widespread literacy in their own architectural language created a powerful, decentralized system of quality control. Everyone had a stake in the outcome, and everyone understood the fundamentals, making the entire society a guardian of its own structural integrity. This cultural framework also beautifully blurred the line between art and engineering. A spiraling petroglyph carved near the top of a wall was not merely decoration. It often traced the path of a hidden crack that had been stabilized, its grooves subtly reinforced with resin to prevent water from seeping in. A majestic, sculpted figure guarding a doorway might also function as a sophisticated waterspout, its outstretched arms channeling rain away from the entrance with elegant precision. In this worldview, a thing of beauty was expected to be a thing of purpose, and structural soundness was itself a form of reverence. The society and its stone skin were a single, interdependent system. A stable, cooperative community produced stable, enduring architecture, and those lasting structures, in turn, reinforced the cultural values that had created them. They built their worldview into the rock, and the mountain gave that worldview a permanence that outlasted empires. This deep symbiosis suggests that the ultimate secret to their resilience may not have been in the stone alone, but in the powerful, invisible bonds between the people who shaped it. These stories of impossible construction have sometimes spiraled into tales of lost continents or visitors from the stars. To explain the inexplicable, we reach for myths. Yet this impulse, however captivating, does a profound disservice to the very people whose legacy we admire. It dismisses the raw power of human ingenuity, patience, and collaboration. The archaeological record tells a different, far more compelling story. It reveals a clear and unbroken timeline of progress. We can trace the evolution from single-room dwellings carved into soft rock faces to the breathtaking, multi-level metropolises that make us wonder. We find the workshops, the quarries, the discarded stone hammers and bronze chisels worn down from years of use. These were not magical implements. They were the simple, effective tools of dedicated artisans. The true magic was not in the tool, but in the generations of knowledge held in the hands that wielded them. Consider the motivation. For these communities, this was not a vanity project. Their survival, their safety, and their cultural identity depended on the success of their construction. This powerful, tangible need fueled an environment of relentless innovation. A failed technique was remembered. A successful one was refined and passed down. To suggest they needed outside help is to ignore the incredible things human beings are capable of when driven by purpose and guided by accumulated wisdom. The real wonder is not that aliens might have built these cities, but that people just like us, with no computers or modern machinery, achieved such staggering feats through observation, trial, and error. This truth is not a reduction of their accomplishment, it is its ultimate celebration. It means that the capacity for such genius resides within us all, a timeless testament to what humanity can achieve when we work in harmony with our world. High above, the silent stones of these cities often point deliberately toward the heavens. This celestial alignment was far more than spiritual theater. It was a masterclass in practical, long-term engineering. For a project that would outlive its original architects, the sun and stars provided the only truly fixed reference points, an unchanging grid against which every wall and foundation could be set. While one generation laid out the primary axis of a temple to capture the first light of the winter solstice, the next could continue the work with absolute confidence, knowing their additions would maintain perfect alignment with the original plan. This celestial anchoring guaranteed structural coherence across centuries, ensuring that new chambers did not inadvertently weaken the load-bearing calculations of the old. The movement of the heavens also served as a vast celestial calendar, a deep understanding of astronomical cycles translated directly into a predictive knowledge of the seasons. By tracking the sun's path, builders knew precisely when the spring rains would arrive, allowing them to schedule excavation work during dry periods and have their water management systems ready for the coming deluge. This integration of cosmic order with earthly construction reflects a world view where stability was a universal principle, connecting the cycles of the sky to the permanence of the habitation. The sky was not just a spectacle to be worshipped, but the most reliable blueprint they possessed, a practical tool for etching permanence into the very face of the earth. Our modern definition of a safe building is a mathematical equation, a calculated risk. Contemporary codes rely on probabilistic models, designing structures to withstand events with a high likelihood of occurring within a set period, often just 50 to 100 years. This system is brilliantly efficient, allowing us to house billions with remarkable speed and cost-effectiveness. It prioritizes the safety of the occupants during that designated lifespan. The ancient builders, however, operated on a seemingly different plane of thought. They pursued a concept closer to absolute safety, constructing not for a probable century but for an indefinite timeline, aiming to withstand the worst conceivable events nature could muster over millennia. One philosophy creates disposable shelters for a rapidly changing society, while the other crafted heirlooms on a civilizational scale. These silent cliff faces pose a difficult question. Is our modern definition of safe inherently short-sighted, focused solely on preventing immediate failure while ignoring the long-term destiny of our creations? This is not a simple judgment of which method is superior. It is a recognition of two fundamentally different relationships with risk and time itself. We see time as a linear path to be managed in segments, while they saw it as a vast, cyclical ocean to be navigated for eternity. Our buildings are designed with an expiration date, theirs with a legacy. This stark contrast forces a necessary re-evaluation of our own priorities. What does it mean to build for the future when our very definition of the future may only extend to the next fiscal quarter? The endurance of these stone cities suggests that true safety might not be about surviving the most common storm, but about being ready for the 1,000-year cataclysm, a perspective that challenges the core of our modern engineering ethos. Even the most perfectly planned structures speak in a quiet language of shifts and size. If you look closely at these ancient walls, you will see a delicate web of hairline cracks tracing across the stone. Where a modern engineer might see failure, these builders saw a conversation. These fractures were not dreaded flaws, but anticipated movements, carefully observed and intelligently managed. They often follow the pre-existing natural fissures within the rock itself, revealing how the builders respected the stone's inherent personality. Instead of forcing the cliff into total rigidity, they allowed it to settle and shift along its own natural pathways, a gentle negotiation with the mountain's deep-seated tendencies. In a remarkable display of foresight, a crack that might channel water was sometimes carefully widened and shaped into a miniature drainage groove, turning a potential weakness into a functional part of the water management system. In other places, these gaps were filled with a specially formulated, flexible mortar, a mix that could absorb and accommodate further movement without shattering. This was not a desperate repair, but a planned flexibility. Studying these subtle imperfections reveals a design philosophy that stands in stark contrast to our own. We often strive for perfect, unyielding stability, an attempt to defeat natural forces. Their goal was resilient equilibrium, a state of balance that accepted movement as an inevitability and designed systems to manage it. This tolerance for controlled imperfection was not a compromise, it was the very source of their strength. The flaws we see today are not a record of decay, but a lasting story of intelligent adaptation, a masterclass in listening to what the stone was always trying to say. The very air and life surrounding these cities became part of their structural integrity. Within the protective alcoves of the cliffs, a unique microclimate flourished, one the builders actively nurtured as a living component of their design. The perpetual shade cast by the massive rock overhangs did more than just cool the air. It dramatically reduced the thermal stress on the stone surfaces. Without the relentless cycle of daily heating and intense cooling, the rock faces experienced far less of the expansion and contraction that slowly fractures stone over centuries. This natural shelter was often enhanced by the presence of hardy, deep-rooted plants that clung to the cliffs. The builders recognized that these root systems acted like a vast, living net, binding the surface rock and soil together, preventing the shallow erosion that can precede larger rockfalls. On constructed terraces, they would sometimes encourage the growth of specific trees and shrubs, their roots weaving through the stonework to create a powerful, organic anchorage against wind and water runoff. This was a deliberate form of bioengineering, a partnership with the local flora. Yet their relationship with the ecosystem was deeply nuanced. With the same careful observation, they identified and managed plant species whose aggressive, searching roots could, over generations, work their way into fine cracks and gradually pry apart foundational stone. They understood the difference between a stabilizing root and a destructive one, selectively weeding and pruning to maintain a perfect equilibrium. This was not a battle against the wild, but a sophisticated form of gardening on a civic scale. The city became a living, breathing system, an integrated ecological niche where human habitation and the natural environment supported one another in a managed, mutually beneficial balance. They did not simply occupy a space in the landscape. They cultivated a role within its delicate web of life, and in doing so, they wove another invisible layer of resilience into their stone tapestry. This profound understanding of their local environment extended beyond the immediate cliff face, influencing the very layout of their communities in ways that reveal a startlingly modern grasp of urban planning. The sheer scale of a cliffside city represents an economy of permanence. An entire community had to first secure a reliable surplus of food and resources, freeing up generations of laborers to dedicate their lives to a project they themselves might never see completed. This was not a short-term construction job. It was a civilizational investment, a deliberate choice to pour immense wealth and effort into creating a legacy of stone. The return they expected was not measured in annual profits, but in the survival and security of their descendants for 1,000 years. This long-term calculus is almost foreign to our modern mindset, where investments are often judged by quarterly returns. For them, the ultimate value was a permanent, defensible home that would end the cycle of vulnerability and rebuilding, a single, monumental expenditure to secure an indefinite future. This front-loaded investment was made sustainable by a deeply local material strategy. While the labor cost in human hours was astronomically high, the financial and energy costs of materials were practically zero. There were no supply chains to manage, no factories producing bricks, no fuel spent transporting stone from distant quarries. The mountain provided everything. This hyper-local sourcing created a closed-loop economic model, one that was incredibly efficient in its use of energy and resources, even if it was lavish in its use of time. The most compelling economic argument, however, is revealed over the breathtaking span of their existence. The initial, generational cost of construction was followed by centuries of minimal maintenance. Their durable, monolithic structures did not need constant repairs, new roofs, or replacement siding. The life cycle cost of these buildings, when spread across a millennium, becomes astonishingly low, a stark contrast to the hidden, accumulating expenses of our own modern structures, which require continuous investment just to slow their decay. They spent time to save time for generations to come, proving that the most economical building is one you only have to build once. Their soaring stone walls stood in majestic isolation, yet the minds that built them were plugged into a global network of ideas. Cities like Petra were not remote outposts, they were thriving cosmopolitan hubs at the crossroads of the world's great trade routes. Caravans laden with silk, spices, and incense did not just carry goods, they carried a more precious cargo, knowledge. With every trader came stories, tales of architectural triumphs and catastrophic failures from empires 1,000 miles away. A merchant from Rome might describe the revolutionary use of concrete, while an engineer from India could share insights into intricate step-well designs that managed water in arid climates. This constant flow of information created an informal, living library of engineering solutions, a vast database of what worked and what did not. The builders of these cliff cities were brilliant synthesizers. They listened to these stories with a keen ear, rapidly adopting, adapting, and refining the best techniques they heard. They might take the concept of a Roman arch and reinterpret it in local sandstone, or integrate a water capture method from the East into their own complex hydrological systems. This cross-pollination of ideas created a kind of hybrid vigor in their architectural language, blending the strongest innovations from multiple cultures into a uniquely resilient whole. A stability solution perfected in one mountain range could, within a generation, be tested and improved upon in another, accelerating innovation at a pace that would be impossible for an isolated society. Their physical location was a defensive fortress, but their intellectual world was expansive and deeply connected. The global exchange of knowledge was the invisible fuel for their local miracles, proving that even the most rooted structures can be born from a world without borders. Even the grandest stone cities hold silent testaments to what did not last. Scattered among the enduring structures are the haunting remains of partial collapses, where sections of a dwelling have sheared away and returned to the mountain. These are not merely ruins, they are the other half of the historical record, a critical archive of failure that reveals the precise boundaries of their engineering wisdom. Archaeologists now carefully map these fallen walls, treating each fracture line not as a mark of defeat, but as a crucial data point. A collapse pinpoints the exact moment where the principles of stability were pushed beyond their limit. It answers the question of what happens when an alcove was carved just a little too shallow, failing to provide adequate shelter from cascading water. It shows the consequence of building on a weaker, more fractured stratum of rock that the initial survey might have missed. It demonstrates the catastrophic result of an undersized or poorly placed drainage channel that allowed water to pool and saturate the foundation. These failures were likely just as instructive to the ancient builders as their triumphs. Imagine a master craftsman observing a collapsed wall that his grandfather had built. He would study the pattern of the fallen stones, analyze the angle of the fracture, and understand exactly which calculation had been off. That hard-won lesson would then inform his own work, leading him to choose a deeper alcove, a more robust anchoring technique, or a wider drainage groove for the next project. This process of learning from collapse created a powerful feedback loop, refining their collective knowledge with each generation. The presence of both enduring masterpieces and instructive ruins on the very same cliff face is a profound reminder that their expertise was not innate. It was earned piece by piece through a long and often unforgiving conversation with the mountain itself. The lessons whispered by the fallen stones are every bit as vital as those shouted by the ones that still stand. The cliff was far more than a simple place to live. It was a living symbol, a fortress for the very soul of the community. In cultures across the globe, building high upon a precipice was an act of profound meaning. The elevation brought them closer to the heavens, a physical manifestation of their spiritual aspirations. The sheer, unassailable face of the rock represented ultimate safety, not just from human enemies, but from the chaos of the world below. This powerful symbolism transformed an immense engineering challenge into a sacred duty. The decades of backbreaking labor were not a burden, but a form of collective devotion, a prayer carved directly into the mountain. Every stone shaped and set in place was a reaffirmation of their identity, a declaration of who they were and what they stood for. They were not merely constructing shelters, they were etching their worldview into the most permanent canvas they could find. The enduring nature of the rock mirrored their deepest desire, the endurance of their community, their traditions, and their memory for all time. The stability of the city was a direct metaphor for the stability of their society and its rightful place in the cosmos. When you understand this, the choice of a cliff becomes a powerful statement of values. It speaks of a people who valued permanence over convenience, spiritual connection over easy access, and legacy over short-term comfort. The stone itself was their ultimate statement, a declaration that they were here to stay, their story woven into the very bones of the earth. This deep, symbolic motivation was the invisible fuel that powered generations of labor, but it also shaped the very rhythm of daily life within those stone walls. Our stewardship of these ancient sites now presents a modern paradox. The very act of trying to save them can inadvertently threaten the delicate balance that has kept them standing for 1,000 years. When a wall shows signs of wear, the immediate impulse is to repair it, to use our strongest modern materials like concrete and steel reinforcement. Yet these modern interventions often backfire. Hard, rigid concrete does not breathe or flex like the original stone and mortar. It traps moisture, creates new pressure points, and can accelerate the decay of the historic fabric it was meant to save. We risk replacing a slow, manageable process of natural settling with a rapid, engineered failure. This creates a profound ethical dilemma. Should we reconstruct a fallen archway using the original methods, even if it means our work might not last as long? Or do we leave the ruin as we found it, allowing the story of its graceful decay to remain fully authentic? Every path forward carries a cost. Opening these places to the public is essential for education and funding, but the breath, the footsteps, and the subtle vibrations of thousands of visitors introduce a new form of environmental stress the original builders never planned for. The dust from clothing, the oils from hands resting on a carved balustrade, these tiny, cumulative actions can erode stone in ways that wind and rain never could. Our desire to touch the past, to stand where they stood, becomes an unintended force of erosion. This forces us to confront a difficult truth. Our role is not to master these places with our superior technology, but to become humble students of their original wisdom. The greatest preservation may sometimes be a gentle, restrained form of care, one that monitors and supports rather than aggressively restores. We are learning that to truly protect them, we must first understand that their stability was not a static condition, but a dynamic, living relationship with the earth, a relationship we are only beginning to comprehend. This collaboration is forging a new science of permanence, where the past is no longer a static relic but a dynamic laboratory. Archaeological engineers now use supercomputers to run simulations on digital twins of these cities, applying virtual millennia of wind, rain, and seismic tremors. They can watch in accelerated time as stress patterns bloom across a virtual cliff face, revealing precisely why a specific arch collapsed while the wall next to it held firm for 1,500 years. This is more than just forensic history. It is a way to test the ancient builders' intuition with modern physics, validating their choices with hard data. Alongside this, a global race is underway to digitally preserve these sites in breathtaking detail. Teams using laser scanners and drone photogrammetry are capturing every crack and contour, creating high-fidelity models that are impervious to the slow decay that will eventually claim the originals. This creates an immortal archive, ensuring that even if a section of rock succumbs to time, its complete blueprint remains for all future generations to study. The driving ambition behind this global effort is to extract a new old design philosophy. Researchers are not just looking at how a single wall was built, but at the universal patterns of resilience that connect a city in Turkey to one in Peru. They seek to translate this deep, place-based wisdom into a practical toolkit for our own uncertain climatic future, a future of rising seas and intensifying storms. The silent stones are finally giving up their most guarded secret, not just a method for building, but a timeless principle for enduring. These silent stone cities are not just monuments to the past, they are active classrooms for our future. Their enduring presence offers a quiet but powerful critique of our own fleeting structures. We have journeyed through their secrets, from a profound geological intuition that saw the mountain as a partner, to the masterful water systems that tamed their greatest threat. We have seen how their rock-cut integration created a unified mass that dances with earthquakes rather than fighting them. These civilizations understood that true durability is not a product of force, but of harmony. It is a symphony composed from deep listening to the land, a long-term vision that stretched across generations, and a culture that valued permanence as its highest goal. The lessons etched into these cliffs challenge the very core of our modern approach. They ask us to consider the life cycle of a building not in decades, but in centuries. They urge us to see the environment not as an obstacle to be conquered, but as the most trusted partner in our designs. Let these ancient marvels change the way you see the world around you. Look at the buildings in your own community and ask what stories they will tell in 500 years. The greatest mystery left by these cliffside architects is not the technical skill they possessed, but the wisdom they embodied. The stones have spoken their secrets. The real question is, are we finally ready